Chapter 87, 92. Yo Asakura, Len Tao, Horo Horo, Lyserg Diet Hell, Chocolove McDonald and Ryanosuke Umemiya had defeated almost all the guardians in hard fighting, in which some of them even died and were resurrected again. Now, after a variety of great, hard and emotional battles with his former mentors, our elemental warriors and others were about to face the last guardian on the top floor with the aim of defeating Hao when he was still integrating with the great spirits in his dream state. The last floor, the universe. A room that completely simulated the atmosphere of outer space. No oxygen, no gravity, extreme temperatures, and other phenomena that made living in outer space almost impossible for any living being based in carbon and H2O, in that reality. So in order to get through and fight in that room, everyone got inside the Ryanosuke Oversoul Orochi, from where the strong could fight without spending too much Furioku and keeping their vital signs in that extreme environment. Welcome. Nice to meet you. I'm the official in charge of the last plant. My name is Rutherford, said a small person with the aspect of a gray alien dressed in a typical Apache dress, surfing on what looked like the typical OVNI. Awa awa. An alien. Everyone shouted when seeing the appearance of Rutherford. TSK. Why are you so scared? It's obvious that aliens do not exist. I'll expose your real form. Shouted Len as he attacked the alien-like guardian. At that moment Rutherford raised his hand and said with superiority, but aliens do exist. And this. But a mysterious voice from which nobody knew its origin said at that moment, yes, you are right. Power is the best proof. Rutherford said, repelling and twisting Len with his control over gravity. They all said, including Rutherford. They were surprised by the ability of the last officer, but everyone was more intrigued by that strange voice, which they should not have heard since this was a closed room and there was no one else in that place. After checking that there was nobody and not knowing what the origin of that voice was, everyone decided to ignore it and continue their battle. My power is gravity. There are still so many forces in the world humans can't explain. And also many beings. Your journey ends in this plant, said Rutherford using her gravitational power over the whole group. Go-ah! They shouted at being crushed by an invisible force against their will. What's happening? Ryanosuke yelled, wriggling inside his oversoul. It's like a magnet. We're stuck, said Chocolove, whose face was attached to Ryanosuke's oversoul. Yhwach, we have to. Ow! Horo Horo shouted, trying to resist the gravity, without much success. The gravity has been amplified. Attempting resistance is absolutely useless, said Rutherford, showing her superiority and explaining her power as it is done in all good manga. WH. Horo Horo said, crushed by gravity, trying to say. What? I have no reason to hide it anymore. The truth lies inside of what's right in front of you. This is the power of my armor oversoul. The real power of Grey Saucer, Rutherford said, stupidly revealing the origin of her power and showing that there was someone inside the armor in the form of an alien. Amour O.S. They shouted due to the strange appearance of that armor. Ah! It's true, there's someone inside. But then what's with that spirit? Yo said, which was really shocked. Fufufu. I'm telling you that it's a real alien. Believe it or not, they have visited our planet on countless occasions, there are traces everywhere. Their wisdom far surpasses that of humans, and they have an intelligence and crafts people couldn't dream of, Rutherford said, explaining something that looked like a conspiracy theory, but it was true. Totally true, and thanks for the compliment, said once again the mysterious voice. Now they did not believe that voice were their imaginations, that voice really existed. Eh? Who you are? Where are you hiding? Rutherford shouted, looking around trying to find the origin of that voice. She very angry, because that voice had spoiled what was going to be an epic speech and her great contribution to manga, contribution that would have some impact on the Shaman King sequel attempt. Do you have any hidden ally? Rutherford asked the others, not understanding what they intended. Hey! That's what we were going to ask you right now, said a crushed Horo Horo representing everyone, who did not know where he came from or who that voice belonged to. No one remembered having a hidden ally with that power in this fight. Oh, don't worry about me, I will not interfere in your battle, continue as if you did not hear a strange and suspicious voice that you do not know its origin in such a decisive place and moment, said the mysterious voice once again, showing what his intentions could be, which made almost everyone relieved, but still disturbed a few. Rutherford, angry by not being able to brag about the wisdom of her spirit, but worried about the current situation, said, I don't know who you are or if what you say is true, but it does not matter what you plot, is too late. It's already time for Shaman King Sama to awake. But I'll finish you before that happens. Heavy G. I can't move my body. At this rate we will be smashed to death. Ryonosuke said with his exaggerated toupee deformed by the gravity. I see, after hurting you I suddenly really feel like going on. I'm sorry but, you're gonna be defeated, Rutherford. Yo said calmly, as if there was no crushing gravity on him. How? How can you move with this high gravity? Rutherford said so surprised that his eyes seemed to protrude from his oversoul armor. Furioku annulment. It's obvious that your spirit is the one creating this gravity, so there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of, Yo said with his usual calm and peaceful attitude while performing the Furioku annulment on Rutherford, cancelling his oversoul armor and all her skills made of Furioku, almost any skill in Shaman King, revealing her true appearance. She's a cutie, said Ryonosuke, who seemed to have recovered his life and the toupee upon see the adorable appearance of Rutherford, who was blushing. She's very shy. I don't usually agree with your criteria, but this time I totally agree with you, Ryonosuke, said the mysterious voice once more. That mysterious voice is also a pervert, thought some of the elemental warriors while Rutherford blushed even more. When suddenly, Clin. The Oracle Bell. Yo said watching the Oracle Bell on his arm, the communication item, among other functions, that was delivered at the beginning of the competition to choose the Shaman King. I've received something too. Damn it. Why at such an important moment? Said Ryonosuke observing the message received in the Oracle. Hey. What the hell is this? Like Chocolove, Lyserg, Len and Horo were also so surprised, confused, and finally terrified. So small. That was the message that everyone received in his oracle, message that was not addressed to them or to another person. This message was directed to the entire world, including the planet itself and its asteroid. Yes. It's really small, said that mysterious voice in an extremely arrogant way, even more than the most OP villain of this world, the one that used to say those words often in this world. Rutherford looked around and realized that something bad had happened. The room they were in that simulated the space had gone out suddenly. The plant has turned off. Not only that. The oracle bells have rung, which means that. They all thought with great despair. Yo's face darkened, all his optimism and tranquility evaporated like a drop of water in an industrial furnace. Everything will work out. Up until now, every time I believed in those words, everything did work out in the end. I know that the best I can do is to always keep believing, no matter how bad the situation gets. I know it, but this situation of absolute despair is quite a different matter. Nothing will work out now. Yo thought, that sensed that the apocalypse was very near upon feel the brutal presence behind this plant. They have failed. That intuition, that feeling, that premonition was being contrasted on the top floor, where Godolva, the leader of the Apaches, watched in terror and fascination how the person she had been guarding for days was rising. Which meant that the new king is awake. What it meant, that everyone could sleep forever in a few moments with a simple thought of that abominable and powerful being. Nobody and nothing was able to face it, no shaman, no spirit of this world, no weapon created by humanity, no natural disaster. Nothing. It was the end that everyone had tried to avoid. Hao had become the Shaman King, the undisputed god of this world. An almighty being. And everyone inside or outside this room and building had felt the same fear. All but one. And it's time to go back to sleep, at least a bit. Said once again that mysterious voice, which reverberated in the ears of everyone present as if it were a jug of cold water in that moment. At that moment someone appeared out of nowhere behind Hao, the terrifying new Shaman King who had recently awakened and reigned up from his stone throne. That someone looked like a man of about 25 years. He was a strange tall, muscular man with the upper part of his body completely naked. The strange thing is that his body seemed to be covered by a fur similar to that of the apes, which combined perfectly with his long monkey tail, which was dancing in the air. All his hair included the body coat was reddish, a red that did not seem natural. It was as if he were alive, and the strangest and characteristic of everything was that that person had 3 eyes of different color. What is? Goldva, the leader of the Apache, muttered, which was shocked and terrified to see and feel the immense power of Hao, the new Shaman King. And now also witnessed as out of nowhere appeared another mysterious being. A mysterious being of which she had no words available to describe his appearance, but above all, because that being shed an aura that to the amazement and disbelief of all, that was not overshadowed in the least by Hao's aura. Broly, true Super Saiyan God, had made his first appearance facing the public in this world in the most decisive moment of all mankind, of this earth. He had just appeared when Hao was about to devour all the souls of that were on the island where the Shaman King tournament was being held, and later he will do the same with the souls of all humans of the planet, integrating them with the Great Spirits. The Great Spirits, the oldest and most powerful spirit on the planet, formed by billions of spirits, where all life forms don't matter how big or small they are, they born and return to it, the spirit that only the Shaman King can touch and control. A power that, without considering many different spiritual abilities, almost grants omniscience and omnipotence over all the living beings that have been born and that will inevitably return to his oversoul. The Great Spirits. The power of the Shaman King, the absolute king of planet Earth and all its past, present and future inhabitants. A god. An almighty god from the terrestrial human point of view. Now this god had transferred his own soul into the Great Spirits and had allowed his body to devour the souls of all person near his rank as if it were an automaton. That god was about to devour at the moment of his awakening the souls of Lip and Rap, the two little Lolas who accompanied Goldva in the ritual, but... However, something prevented him from doing so, although devouring the souls of those two weak girls was as easy as breathing, and in the same way that thing also prevented him from devouring the souls of all the shamans on the island. Hey little Hao, you shouldn't do something so cruel to underage girls. If you absorb their souls now, they won't be able to become beauties in a few years, said Broly in his role of Southern Dandy. What? Shouted the real Hao within the Great Spirits. This was a situation he didn't expect at all, especially now that he had become the Shaman King, the most powerful being on the planet. Hao immediately tried to focus more closely on the origin of that great anomaly, and in that room he found him. Broly, who stood between Goldva, Lip, and Rap. At that time, the Shaman King was more stunned than he initially was. There is no information about him inside the Great Spirits. There is no information about his birth or past lives, not even from someone who knows him or who has ever seen him in all the history. And my powers are not effective against him, which may be because his life and soul didn't originated from the Great Spirits, and by his appearance is quite likely. Another possibility is that his power is similar or even superior to that of the Shaman King himself, and by his ability to prevent me from stealing the souls of those insects. I don't think this is an outlandish theory. Who you are? And what do you want? Hao asked, who had returned to his own body and was watching him very intently as he continued to try to devour his soul, without apparent success. Is he alien like Oversoul of Rutherford? And if so, what is he doing here? Why, despite not feeling his Furioku, I feel that overwhelming oppression around him. It's terrifying, it's absurd. How can there be two gods on the planet? Goldva thought with fear, who was about to go mad by being near the presence of those powerful beings. Me? I'm just a reputed therapist specialized in treating stupid teenagers. I have already successfully corrected the behavior of two idiots, and you, my friend, you are going to be the third, of which I hope will be a long list of rehabilitated adolescents, although technically you have more than 1,000 years. But we will ignore that small detail for the sake of my curriculum, said Broly, speaking with the same chucky, sarcastic and confident attitude that Tony Stark used in Avengers 1 with Loki in his own tower. Technically the protagonists, together with all the souls inside the Great Spirits, either because they died earlier or because Hao devoured their souls in the last chapters, along with his original mother, managed to reform him. But I'm going to award the merit this time. I'm on a roll. What? You're laughing at me? Hao shouted angrily. He had reached the supreme power for which he had been fighting and planning for more than 1,000 years. And now, in the moment of reaching his long-awaited goal, out of nowhere a strange extraterrestrial being with an unknown power appeared, and dared to treat him with condescension, like a problematic child. He dares to despise me. The Great Hao. The most powerful shaman of history. The Shaman King. Hao was about to manifest his Great Spirit Oversoul at full power for the first time in the material world, despite the possible consequences that could entail. In the manga, Hao used his Oversoul within the Shaman King Society inside the Great Spirits in a combat against Yhwach Sakura, Len Tao, Horo Horo, Lyser Diet Hell and Chocolove McDonald, and if that combat would took place on the material plane would have disintegrated the planet in a few seconds. The scale of this fight was something that could end the world. But... Pum. Crack. We have finally arrived. Yes, but we have arrived late. The walls of the room were broken and from the rubble appeared Yo, Len, Horo Horo, Lyserg, Chocolove, Ryanosuk, the little Opacho and Rutherford, which they left unconscious so that she would not stop them from passing and that Ryanosuk was carrying, but in a non-perverted way, since Yo had told Opacho to watch Ryanosuke in case he had some bad thoughts. Yo! Hao said, observing his twin brother without diminishing his incredible spiritual pressure, but neither increasing it and without losing sight of Broly. Oh hello guys, I see that you have taken your time to recover, and also you have not killed Rutherford, well. See how, you don't have to kill cute girls who are not evil, you could learn something from your twin brother and his friends, said Broly pointing to Yo's group, which was shocked by the appearance of a new variant in this battle for the survival of the human species, and upon seeing the strange appearance of Broly, a being that didn't seem human at all. A being that didn't even seem to be using his same power system that they, despite feeling an immeasurable power coming from him, one similar to Hao's, a power they could barely understand. What is that? Horo and Ryanosuke shouted pointing at Broly, everything in him seemed too mysterious and shocking, but especially they could not look away from his third eye and monkey tail, which danced in an unpleasant way through the air. There is no doubt that he is the one who spoke to us a few seconds ago without us being able to detect him, which proves to have a lot of hidden abilities, and moreover, how that has acquired the powers of Shaman King seems to be alerted to him, as if he is somebody dangerous even when he has reached the powers of a god. In terms of appearance, ignoring many suspicious details, he has a third eye, monkey fur on the body and monkey tail, and this does not look like an oversoul armor type, then. Is he a really wise and powerful alien, like those who spoke about Rutherford a few moments ago? And if he is one of them, has he come to fight against Hao? Lyserg thought with his usual deductive reasoning. You're the one with the strange voice from a few moments ago. Len said impertinently, pointing his halberd at Broly while he didn't take his eyes off Hao, the one they had come to kill. Kill or convincing him not to exterminate all humans as a last alternative. Yeah. Obviously, but don't point me with that kid, you could end up cutting someone who is not me, Broly said in a funny way, but at the same time as if he was a tough guy from the action movies of the 90s, since Len was also a possible candidate to rehabilitate. Is he an enemy then? Cholov said, since he was the one who had the most doubts, since he was blind. I don't know. I'm unable to read his mind, said the little Opacho, very afraid of that simian being. You make too much noise. Hao said, very annoyed, now also for the entrance of Yo and his friends. And of course, Hao also tried to devour their souls with his intimidating gaze as soon as he put his eyes on them, but once again his attack was cancelled. What the hell are you doing here? And what do you intend with it? Defeat me? Hao shouted, moving towards Broly with a great murderous aura that was shaking the whole ancestral building as if it were an earthquake. Who are you and what the hell are you doing here? And what do you intend with it? Defeat me? Steal my throne? Hao shouted, moving towards Broly, shaking the whole ancestral building with his intense murderous aura as if it were an earthquake. Oh, if the looks could kill, ha ha ha. Broly said, not taking seriously the threats of Hao, who was still trying to steal the souls of everyone present on many occasions, so Broly decided to show that nothing has effect on him or the ones around him. Yo, who was quiet trying to understand the situation, suddenly noticed something unexpected. What is it? He muttered as he looked around him. All were being surrounded by strange, almost crystalline spheres, which were becoming more and more translucent every second, and spheres were each linked by a cable, and that cable was attached to the tail of reddish simian alien. His tail has been saving our lives so far. How? Why? Hao exclaimed, as did his twin brother. Surprised? When you tried to devour my soul before, I copied the properties of your spiritual attack with my tail and made part of my tail, acquiring the properties of that attack, an invisible and almost imperceptible attack. And as you should know, two equal forces cancel each other. I'm ingenious, right? Broly said, scratching his imaginary goatee. But some doubted if his goatee had also become invisible like his tail. Everyone was astonished by the method of that strange being, and at the same time they were grateful. They had already realized that this alien was saving them in some way, but knowing that was not a speculation was equally shocking. And before the conversation could be resumed at that time, from the lake that was in that room. Plume. Like Golem a few days ago while Hao was still sleeping assimilating the Great Spirit, a giant sphinx with diver's glasses and a tube emerged from the lake, which was connected to some underground maritime caves. It seems that here there has been a strange development of events, said Anna, which emerged from the Oversoul Sphinx. And with her also came the Asakura family, the Ten family, the Gandhara, Manta, and all the others who had come to assist Yo and the others. Anna! Shouted all the team of the hot springs at the same time, partly with joy and partly with fear to witness the toughest and bossy girl in this manga. Hao once again tried to devour their souls, but once again he was unable to do so. The invisible tail interposed once more in its trajectory. Damn! Hao shouted as he began to manifest his oversoul again. It was then that Broly began to be in a hurry upon see this dangerous situation, for the planet, not for him. UPS, this is bad. Yo, do you mind if I take your twin brother for a walk? I will return it healthy, safe and with better humor, said Broly, teleporting next to Hao and grabbing him by the head. Both disappeared without letting Yo have time to answer his question. And after a few seconds of silence in which everyone tried to understand what had happened. Yo, are you going to explain to me exactly what happened here? Who was he? Why didn't you beat Hao before he became Shaman King? Anna asked with her usual dominant and cool attitude. I was asking the same questions to myself. Haha. Ha, Yo said, disoriented as if he had suddenly awakened from a nap, and with some fear upon see how his fiancée dominatrix approached, knowing what was waiting. At that same moment in another place, Broly and Hao appeared out of nowhere in the great nothingness, a very dark nothingness. Let me go, scum! Hao shouted as he pushed Broly's hand away from his head with his giant oversoul from King's spirit, but there was no sound. You must say, please, if you speak with kindness people will listen to you without you threatening them, Broly said telepathically, making he notice his lack of manners. But Hao's anger quickly turned into a great confusion. Where are we supposed to be? Hao asked urgently. There was not a single soul around him, there was not a single light, not even matter that he could locate with its great detection ability, and of course no sound. It was as if... Are we in the middle of nowhere in space? Did you know that the Milky Way, the galaxy we live in and many other nearby galaxies are right on the edge of a complete cosmic emptiness with a radius of more than 1 billion light-years? Metaphorically, your galaxy is a tiny plot of land in the huge suburbs of a part of the universe, and you're just the god of a tiny planet in that galaxy, which makes you something like the master of the sock drawer of that tiny plot of land, and I say it being benevolent. Well, to summarize, right now we are at the center of that emptiness, known as the KBC emptiness, so we can fight without holding back. It will be very difficult for you to destroy any planet or celestial star here, Broly said telepathically, trying to lower the fumes to Hao, who had a quite excessive god complex, almost as much as our protagonist. The situation was very bizarre and worrying, and Hao understood it perfectly. That strange being with capabilities that he did not even have, like teleporting himself to millions of light years in a second, which meant that without his help he could not return to the Earth. Damn! It is impossible to locate my planet in this emptiness without any reference, and even if it were able to locate the planet taking into account that my maximum speed is that of light and that the maximum life expectancy for a Shaman King is 500 years. I'm stuck here, maybe forever. Exactly. It must be frustrating to become a kind of god and in few seconds be locked in an immense emptiness from which you cannot escape alive by your own means. He. And now the Earth King has no choice but to depend on me to return him to his own planet. Pretty hilarious, Broly said telepathically in a mocking way to Hao, who was about to burn with rage and despair. Now what will you do? Do you intend to leave me here isolated, so I do not kill all the detestable humans? Or maybe you have a proposal or want to make some deal with me? Hao said telepathically to Broly with a lot of hatred. For years he had never tried to negotiate or had been at the mercy of someone. He had always been the one who dictated the rules and treated the rest like insignificant pawns he could crush at any moment. However, for now he understood his place and that the three-eyed monster wanted something from him, otherwise he would have left him there to die without giving further explanations. Very acute despite having lost the ability to read the mind. I just want an interesting match, a fight that will decide what we will do from now on. If I win you will join my cause, but since I am a good person I will let you go and come to Earth whenever you want and can, answered Broly with his muscular arms crossed in a position of power and confidence. And what happens if I win? Hao said telepathically to Broly with confidence. It was possible that he did not have certain abilities that Broly had, like the broken teleportation, but he was the fucking Shaman King. The god of the earth. The king of the stars. He refused to believe that he could not give a good fight to that being, although of course he should not kill him, or he would not leave that place alive. Well, this is something that's not going to happen, so, whatever you want, I suppose, said Broly, taking out a snot and throwing it to the space. He was not worried at all. Hao, being insulted by Broly's words and attitude, became excessively angry once more. Insolent. But you said something interesting. It is assumed that there is not a single star in this immense cosmic void, right? I think this is going to change right now. At that moment Hao activated his oversoul armor in all its splendor, showing his enormous, majestic and almost robotic appearance, and between the two pikes that protruded from his shoulders, a great light and heat originated. In the middle of the pikes of the Great Spirit a star materialized. A true sun with all its characteristics, although on a smaller scale. "Oh," said Broly, surprised, but not much. Solar flare. The sun that floated between the pikes of Hao's oversoul generated both extremely high-temperature solar winds and super-concentrated radioactivity in order to produce a highly damaging and wide-ranging attack towards Broly. A solar flare of these characteristics would be able to affect the atmosphere of the planet and practically carbonize it, but for Broly that was nothing to worry about thanks to his powerful body and protective energy. "Oh, I feel like I was on a beach in August. Your brilliant plan is to beat me, tanning me beautiful skin or causing me skin cancer," Broly said, taking a sunbath with tranquility. That attack had not been effective, he had faced more critical conditions million times when he tried to reach the origin reality. "I really did not expect to be able to win you in the first attack, but what if you receive the next one directly?" Prominence. Then Hao's artificial sun produced crimson pillars of gas that extended to Broly, drastically increasing the temperature and radioactivity. "This can be a problem. Some of my hair could get burned," said Broly as he puffed up his chest and prepared to take something out of his mouth. A great sound explosion of ki spread through the emptiness, as did the light and radiation of Hao's solar flare, pushing back the column of burning gas from the sun. So powerful that the solar flare almost completely dissipated. So relentless that it caused Hao's oversoul to lose its balance even in zero gravity. So impressive that you could even hear the sound clearly despite being in the space. But that great setback did not make Hao go back or discourage him. Since the beginning he knew that his opponent was powerful, that he could not hope to end up in two simple movements. It seems that the less direct and calorific attacks do not seem to affect him. "I will have to change my strategy radically." Comet. From the hands of the Great Spirit concentrated ice and other frozen gases in each of their hands, forming two small comets, but large enough to destroy hundreds of thousands of miles if it would hit a planet. Then he threw one against Broly as if it were a stone which flew a hypersonic speed, and with the other he used his tail as if it were a laser sword. "I know, this last attack is unscientific. First you throw flaming farts and now snowballs. This looks more and more like a children's fight, but you get better," said Broly, extending his hands towards the two comets. Hakai. Upon saying those words, the two comets and their tails were reduced to photons due to the threatening purple light. "What?" Hao exclaimed with a lot of cold sweat running down his body. This was the first time in hundreds of years that he really felt real fear by an attack. Until now he had been uncomfortable with the presence of Broly, who appeared before him in a very inopportune moment, for denying his devouring soul attacks and teleport him in the middle of nowhere, but he felt no fear despite facing something so unknown and macabre. When he teleported him from the earth to this empty space, he felt threatened and even desperate, but still he was not afraid. Even if Broly left him abandoned in that place and died of old age after 500 years, he still could be reborn once more for the next edition of the Shaman King tournament, as he had done on other occasions. However, that attack, that disintegration ability, was different. Was terrifying. Even if it was only for a second, I felt a great fear from the depths of my soul. I felt as if that attack was capable of completely eliminating my soul, preventing me from being able to reincarnate. This was the greatest fear in Hao's heart, the greatest fear of any shaman. Therefore he had to finish that fight as soon as possible, or maybe he could use that skill on him. From the O.S of the Great Spirit's numerous compartments along the lengths of both its arms and legs opened, and from them a countless number of meteorites that surrounded Broly from all places were created. I don't know what that skill was, but surely you need a hand to disintegrate each objective. "Can you disintegrate so much of my burning messengers of heaven?" Hao said, hiding his huge O.S and himself behind a lot of meteors to not be within the reach of Broly. Meteor. Upon announcing the name of that attack, all the meteors were thrown at Broly at the same time. Hao did not want to give him a second to use that skill called Hakai again. "Another one that throws me meteorites with the hope of killing me? They never learn. But it's not bad, you've gone from throwing snowballs to stones, you're maturing," Broly snorted, as if he was tired of repeating a monotonous and boring routine. With a simple glance, all the meteorites stopped moving and were now suspended in the void, turning on themselves. Tatsumaki tactic. Fuck, Hao thought as he moved away as quickly as possible from his own meteorites, that had escaped his control. And he did well, because in a few seconds all the meteorites began to gather, as if they had been trapped by a gravitational field, and began to merge as if each of them were clay forming a ball. Broly was collecting all the meteorites with telekinesis to form a fairly small planet. "You have never heard that the union is force?" said Broly just before kicking the small desert planet that he had formed towards Hao, also making a reference to Star Wars. A giant asteroid was approaching at great speed towards him, but Hao did not despair, rather he was incredibly calm and satisfied. "Great, isn't it? I was just making the preparations for your defeat. An incredible and unbeatable power with no limits. The final stage of a star's evolution. An explosion that can outshine a whole galaxy," Hao said while the sun between the pikes of his O.S grew and shone with more and more intensity. Supernova. Until it exploded in an incredibly powerful and wide-ranging blast, swallowing with lick several light years of that immense cosmic void and evaporating the ball of meteorites that was about to impact against him. "Not bad, it's a small-scale supernova, it would have been able to destroy the solar system without problems, there's no doubt about that. With this attack you have surpassed beings like Frieza and Cell, despite not having a great physical strength, an insignificant physical strength that can't even comparable to Krillin," said Broly in sunglasses, clapping before Hao's attack. He had never before witnessed an enemy perform an attack of such a high scale before. And without stopping to ask about the names that Broly had pronounced, he continued with his speech, "You survived. I expected it, but the gravitational collapse of a star makes it explode. Once the star is gone, gravity can't escape because it's trapped, so it starts condensing. And the result is a gravitational field with an incredibly high density," Hao said while in the middle of the two pikes of his OS, where before he had placed the little sundae. A huge vortex appeared, a vortex that began to swallow all the debris produced from the fight between Broly and Hao. "A black hole. Wow, even my normal teleportation ability is affected by this spatial distortion. This is something dangerous. And exciting at the same time," Broly said as he was drawn into the black hole due to the huge and powerful gravitational field. "Ha ha 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 ha. If you get absorbed you're dead. Your souls will be trapped there forever and you'll never be able to come back." Hao screamed like a psychopath as he watched how Broly got closer and closer to the point of no return from his most powerful attack. He. "I'd like to check it out," said Broly before his body was reduced to the size of a pinhead and devoured by the black hole between the pikes of the Great Spirit. After Hao's black hole devoured Broly, it was still shallowing at full capacity without relaxing in the least. If it were not in the cosmic void, that black hole would continue to devour more matter, growing over time until it devours an entire galaxy, but in these circumstances it was impossible. "In the end you turned out to be smaller than you thought," Hao said to himself in an arrogant and despotic way, as usual, as he watched with pride the black hole produced by his almighty Oversoul. "It's my victory. Although I may have overstretched a bit. I just needed to defeat him so that he could give me back to my planet, but in the end I killed him. Although it is not a big problem for me. Once I am sure that your body has been reduced to atoms, I will release the black hole and take over his soul trapped in the gravitational vortex. Once his soul will be in my power, I will refine it into a spirit under my control and I will manipulate it to be able to use his skills and knowledge and go back to the earth with his teleport. Either by his own will or not. Ha ha ha." He laughed like an evil genius of after beating the one he had been and surely would be the most powerful enemy he could find. For a moment, he thought he could lose, even though he had the absolute power for which he fought for more than 1,000 years, and once he got Broly's soul he could make his horizon expand even more. His power and knowledge could encompass beyond the planet Earth and the stars of the Milky Way. That being, where he came from. How did he know about the planet Earth or the Shaman King competition? How did he know so much about others and me? What kind of life form is he? What were his abilities? How did he gain them? What kind of knowledge is in his head? What great mysteries and wonders will he show me? A few minutes ago, I thought I had reached the power and definitive knowledge, and instance after achieving it I discover that there is a much bigger world outside. I am anxious to know more. Being Shaman King may not only have been a goal, but a beginning." Hao was happy and eager to see what surprises Broly's soul could bring, but Papam. Guawajaj. Hao felt great pressure all over his body and instantly began to throw up blood from his mouth as if he were a fountain. "What's happening? No. It cannot be true." Hao screamed in dismay and confusion as he observed the changes in his black hole. The gravitational vortex was becoming less intense, its shape was changing irregularly every second, and most striking of all, from the black hole began to emerge light, a light increasingly intense, an intense blue light. Impossible. Nothing can escape from a black hole. Gua judged. Hao screamed once again in dismay. This was turning into a nightmare that he wanted to wake up from. Since from the center of the black hole came out two hairy hands that grabbed the edges of the black hole and began to widen it as if it were the collar of a tight shirt, and once widened, from those hands came the arms that pushed even more strongly until... Congratulations, ma'am, you have given birth to a boy, well, a muscular handsome man. LOL. Being reduced beyond Planck's length is a pretty, disconcerting experience. Broly said as he poked his head out of the black hole, as if he were a college student who had left her room for the first time after study days for the exams. Guaj. I must, stop it. Hao said with bloodshot eyes and spitting even more blood. Maintaining that black hole in a normal way already consumed a lot of energy and concentration, but now this was creating an inhuman pressure on Hao. He couldn't keep that hole any longer without destroying his body. And the black hole was cancelled, returning Broly's body to his normal shape. Nothing bad. In fact, it has been quite impressive. With an attack like this not even someone like Butte could have survived. I congratulate you. It wasn't a bad decision to come to this reality after all. Although you and your OS were the only interesting thing in this place, said Broly congratulating the injured Hao for his great work. He had never before faced a challenge in which he had to use so much physical strength, his immortality, and space-time knowledge to get out of a dangerous situation. Butte? Another reality? What are you talking about? Hao said at the same time he treated his wounds, not understanding exactly what Broly was referring to, but for those words he began to imagine something too shocking for any mind. Broly with a smile read part of Hao's thoughts. Should it be hard for you not to be able to read people's thoughts after so many years, right? Don't worry about those details, since you don't have any skills other than to offer me. You'll know all the answers very soon, Mappa Duji. With those confusing and threatening words Strauss in which he named the name that Hao used in his first life, the tail stand of Broly began to grow. Grow, 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 grow. Until it reached a size that couldn't be counted on kilometers, it had to be counted with light years, making the O.S of the Great Spirit seem insignificant in comparison. Even Hao, who was watching the growth process at an appreciable speed for the human eye, couldn't do anything but open his mouth in astonishment. Am I unable to distinguish between this immense void of space and his tail? I'm so small. Those were the words that resonated in Hao's head and soul as he felt the universe itself fall on his head. Planet Earth. Hall of the Shaman King. A few hours after the galactic battle. The Shaman King room was filled with confused people who were trying to catch up on everything that had happened and waiting for the return of that strange being and Hao. Well, many didn't want to see Hao again. When suddenly... Hi yo! Upon hearing that powerful and familiar voice, they all turned towards their origin. How? They all shouted with enough fear. Has Hao defeated that monster and now comes to finish with us? That's what everyone thought, but... Relax, I will not try to devour your souls again, Hao said as if he was forgiving their lives, literally. Hey, really? Yo and the others wondered, including Anna with relief and disbelief. And what made you change your mind? Asked Sithi Saigon, the leader of the Gandharas, asking solemnly, having noticed Hao's strange state of mind. We could say that this man named Broly, in a very orthodox way, has made me see humanity from another perspective. He has shown me that I am not as big as I thought I was. And that what I really searched for so long was always by my side, but my hatred and anger blinded me, preventing me from seeing them, said Hao with melancholy and blaming himself for it. It was at that moment when Mantamune, the cat that Hao adopted in his first life, appeared and scaled towards his shoulder just like Ohachio, the little demon that once cared for the little orphan Hao Asakura during his first life. Mantamune. Yo and Anna yelled when they saw the adorable and reliable cat that saved their lives more than once when they were childs. Meow. Mantamune responded with a meow, since now he was only in his cat form. And before Yo could be surprised by the appearance of Ohachio and the symbol of his chest, a beautiful woman very similar to Anna suddenly appeared behind Hao. Evidently she was Hao's mother, his original mother when he was known as Mappa Duji in his first life. Eh. Some shouted when seeing the appearance of that woman. Hao's mom? Chocolove asked, since with his blindness he couldn't distinguish it well. She sure looks like Anna-san, Lyserg said, using his great British detective skills. I'm sorry everyone. My stupid you have given a lot of trouble, said Hao's mother, apologizing for the terrible attitude that her son had the last 1,000 years. Mother, Not here please, Hao said quite embarrassed as he watched the faces of all the presents and how they looked at him with a strange face, as if they felt embarrassed by him. But Hao didn't seem to mind that, he was quite happy now. Weehee. I'm so happy for you, Nii-chan. Yo said with a big smile and tranquility. Ni. Hao replied somewhat annoyed by this overconfidence. Victory is ours, they claimed the remaining elemental warriors. Don't get carried away. I haven't changed my mind. I would still like to kill every human on Earth. But for the time, I'll only watch attentively how you all try to fix everything before your time runs out, Hao said, reasserting everyone who died in the Shaman King tournament at the same time. And just one more thing. I'm the fucking Shaman King. Don't be so impertinent, yo, said Hao, reaffirming his position and authority. He had become perhaps a better person, but not so much. Okay. No problem, Ni-chan. Yo replied quite fondly. By the way, where did that alien go? Said Anna, who wanted to solve all the loose ends. I'm afraid he is not too far away, said Hao, who was having a bad premonition. Yo, said once again the mysterious voice for all, that wasn't so mysterious anymore, everyone knew who Broly was. Yes. Yo said with stupor and expectation. This was Broly, the super extraterrestrial with extraordinary abilities that had made change his mind to his evil twin. If he had something to tell him, must be something very important and transcendent. Therefore everyone paid close attention to his wise words. Upon the doubt, the most buxom. Remember this words, yo. Broly said before disappearing. What? They shouted all for those amazing and disappointing mythical words. Are these supposed to be the final words of a being who surpassed the god of the earth? But in a few seconds all eyes focused on Anna, or more specifically, on a very flat part of Anna. Crack. 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 And in a synchronized way a great murderous aura emerged from his small, flat body. A murderous aura that made everyone wonder if it was such a bad idea for Hao to devour their souls. I'm still in the growth phase. Anna screamed with uncontrolled fury as she advanced with her hand held high towards Yo and friends. Broly. Damn you. They all shouted as they ran for their lives. On the moon. In this precise moment, Broly was sitting on a rock right next to the American flag while quietly observing the planet Earth, more precisely the Shaman King Tournament Island. Ha ha ha. In the end everything has finished in a similar way. The truth is that I liked the end of Shaman King, a different ending where the ultimate invincible villain is not defeated with an absurd and unjustified power-up, they just make him realize how idiotic he had been, and with that he tries to be a better person and Shaman King, although I would also have liked someone to defeat him like in a typical shonen. With which I have achieved both ends at the same time. Ha 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 ha, Broly said, imitating Dr. Manhattan's stance as he watched the Earth with a smile, satisfied that he had fulfilled one of his ambitions. Broly had defeated and assimilated Hao as a new soldier in his Eternal Legion, and after that, Dr. Broly treated him until he could see that his mother was always by his side, but that he was unable to see her because of the accumulated hatred he had towards humanity since she was murdered. Hao, another damn idiot like Madara and Obito, but more idiot than the other two combined. Why are there so many villains in the manga who are convinced that the only way to find peace and happiness is the unification of all people in an abstract entity or a similar shit? Evangelion, Code Geass, 666 Satan, Naruto, TTGL. It's a fucking stupidity. They base their stupid discourse in that the only way to end the conflict is for people to understand each other. Ja. As if you perfectly understand the opinion or way of life of a person was going to make us automatically share that opinion or way of life. Understanding is not sharing. Not even if you become a mass of souls. The individuality of the almost collective species called human is what makes us what we are, and we do the things we do to fulfill our goals, although for this we must associate, compete, and face other individuals. It is impossible for all of us to agree on everything, so the conflict is inevitable. And that is the trigger of the evolution and prosperity that humanity and every life form. And his stupid idea is to destroy the individuality of each person by turning them into a mass of unique thought. The only constant in life and existence is the change produced by the actions and reactions of every entity in the omniverse. And to avoid any negative change supposedly produced by not understanding each other is to eliminate all individuality and the possibility of making any change. The way to end the conflicts of humanity is to eliminate humanity. What a brilliant idea. I can already imagine all the politicians with this thesis. The way to avoid fights in football is to eliminate football. The way to end child abuse is to eliminate all children. The way to end sexism is to eliminate the sexes. Fucking idiots. If the whole existence is something so bad for you, end your fucking life. But leave me be in my way. Well, let's focus on the idiot How. How by itself wasn't too powerful, at least taking as reference the definition of power of the Dragon Ball universe, but he had in his power great knowledges and skills. He is the master of the yin-yang, having the ability to control the elements, divination, return from death when he wanted, create spirits, demons and other entities and control them, that without counting the normal abilities of each shaman to use spirits of multiple forms. He was a great asset to the future plans of Broly, a great master of the spiritual existence, as necessary as the scientist department. However, the most important thing was the Great Spirit, the most powerful spirit of all, although in that case Broly had only copied the structure of the Great Spirit. The Great Spirit was a huge mass of spirits that contains the soul of every living being that there has been and is on Earth, the beginning and the end of every living being in the planet. There was a lot of information inside the Great Spirit, but Broly wasn't interested in the Earthlings' souls that existed within him. He was interested in something else. It's been quite entertaining. It's been more than a decade that I don't have a galactic battle, and I've never been swallowed by a black hole before. For now it would be better for the King of the Earth to stay in his domain. Having momentarily separated him from this dimension has already caused certain problems for spirits that couldn't reach the Great Spirit. Well, I already have the necessary knowledge for the next world, at least to avoid some problems with my physical body. And with this ends Shaman King, and in a few years should start the story of Flowers with the son of Yo and Anna. Hannah, a story that unfortunately couldn't continue. Although I hope to see it in some future. Siri-idi. Yhwach, the creator of the Quincy and leader of the Wandenreich organization, had invaded with his slaves the Soul Society, killing thousands of figurant Shinigamis and many other minimally relevant Shinigamis, or at least they were somewhat powerful. Yhwach, using various stratagems, managed to assassinate Shigekuni Yamamoto Genryusai, the legendary general commander of the Godai 13 and the most powerful Shinigami, the one with the most destructive power of all. After killing him, the almighty final villain that nobody expected had a free way to reach the palace of the spiritual king, where he also killed Ichibe Hyasub, the leader of the royal guard, the Shinigami with the most annoying, perverse and hacked skills that exist. After assassinating the spiritual king and taking his powers to increase his own, he again faced Ichigo, a much more powerful Ichigo with total control over his Zanpakuto and Hollow, with the irrelevant help of Orihime, which would heal him in battle and assist in any way she could. However, he was brutally beaten by Yhwach, so much so that he could not even show his Bankai before he shattered Zangetsu. Again. After that, Yhwach opened a portal to the Soul Society with the aim of destroying it completely, also the human world and Hueco Mundo, to take control of all known planes of existence, except Hell. However, there he found Aizen in a sealed state, which confronted him, and later Rinji and Ichiko with his restored Zangetsu also joined to the battle. Again. These three ex-enemies would begin the final battle for the destiny of all the worlds, a battle that for now they were losing due to Yhwach's almighty ability that gives him the ability to see the future and modify it at will. I thought I made it pretty clear. That even if you chased me down you wouldn't be able to change a single damn thing, Yhwach said as he extended his black Ryatsu around him while Rinji tried to do something that would be useless, that applies to you as well. Abarai Rinji. Bankai. Suizabimaru. Rinji shouted as he jumped to attack Yhwach, but, without even touching or approaching to Yhwach. Rinji already lost his left arm, as well as his Bankai NGH. Shit. Even a meager Bankai will be made impotent when Sillet get through that skull of yours. All Bankai have already been destroyed in the future, and yet you would still oppose me. So in order to drive this point home, I'll crush you with my very own hands. Aizen. Yhwach said to an Aizen in a sealed state that took advantage of that moment to launch himself on him to make an attack. Hada 99. Goryu Tenmitsu, Aizen said, creating one of the most powerful Kidu arts. Summoning several energy dragons from all places, destroying everything around him as they ran towards Yhwach to devour him, like Aizen with his famous Zanpakuto Kyuka Suijetsu. By the way, I appears you've yet to notice, Aizen Sasuke, that your Kyuka Suijetsu has already been broken. Yhwach said while Aizen watched surprised as his Zanpakuto was broken, moment that Yhwach used to attack him with the palm of his hand, hurting and throwing him far away. And in less than a second. Futile. I've already seen that as well, Ichigo, Yhwach said to an Ichigo who followed the same ambush strategy as Aizen. However, in this case he had already lost his left arm even before his final enemy could stop Zangetsu with his bare hands as in the other occasions, destroying Zangetsu partially for the umpteenth time. a golden opportunity slipping right through your fingers. You assessed the layout of our battle situation, and decided it would be ideal for you to unite yourself with Aizen Susuke. However, as you have clearly seen, Kyoka Suigetsu's is no match for mine either. Remember, nothing escapes my gaze, Yhwach said in an overly arrogant way, destroying Zangetsu, again, with the palm of his hand, rest in pieces. Ichigo, and with those words, with the palm of his hand he opened a hole in his chest, a hole bigger than the one made by Ulquiorra in the Hollow World saga. This attack was deadly, causing Ichigo to spit blood out of his mouth while Yhwach put his arm inside the hole to hold his lifeless body in a gore way. Yhwach in this form seemed invincible, untouchable, omniscient and almighty. Nothing and nobody seemed to be a rival for him. It's been fun, Ichigo. Your resistance was midly amusing at best. So the least I can do for you is erase your existence along with Soul Society, he shouted with satisfaction while witnessed how all his enemies had died or are been knocked out with his almighty ability. But at that moment, I see. So you think you're gazing at Kurosaki Ichigo. Fascinating, the one whose arm had been sliced, destroyed the Zanpakuto and opened a hole in the chest turned out not to be Ichigo. It was Aizen. In less than a fraction of a second, Yhwach understood what had happened. He had been inside Aizen's illusion from the beginning and had been fighting against him all the time and not against Ichigo, but that means Getsuga Tenshu. It was too late to react, since the real Ichigo had cut him in two. Yhwach was dead, and all that was left of him was his black Ryatsu that once covered his body, and now covered the ground like a huge black spot with what looked like Dolly's eyes. Ichigo watched what looked like the corpse of the greatest threat to all the worlds, until Aizen spoke to him to have a practically redundant conversation. Passable or not? Well done responding as quickly as you did to my Kyoka Suigetsu, Aizen said with irony, which was bleeding from his torn arm and the hole in his chest. On my way here, I got this strange familiar feeling. It was similar to the one I felt back when you had placed everyone under Kyoka Suigetsu's spell, Ichigo replied as he recalled the battle in which Aizen faced almost all of the captains, lieutenants and former lieutenants, who fought each other thinking that everyone was Aizen. Aizen with a face that showed irony, sarcasm and melancholy said, indeed. I released Kyoka Suigetsu before you all arrival here. I confirmed that I could be used to interfere with the Almighty's, clairvoyant powers. The final component was you who is unaffected by Kyoka Suigetsu. Who would have thought that me not showing you the release of Kyoka Suigetsu would have paid off like this, Kurosaki Ichigo? But suddenly when nobody expected it, the black spot that was the corpse of Yhwach moved once more and expanded, covering several meters around Ichigo and Aizen. Aizen! Ichigo shouted, but it was too late. The black Ryatsu had completely trapped the weakened and sealed Aizen, and in that moment the nightmare resurfaced once more. In a more terrifying way than ever. A fraction of the Ryatsu with surrealistic eyes rose up near Ichigo and started talking. Kyoka Suigetsu's effect appears to have end. Pride? Or did it just reach its limit? Say Ichigo. Did you really think something of that caliber would be enough to kill me? These were the words that echoed throughout the dimension as Ichigo watched in horror and despair how in Yhwach totally covered by his black Ryatsu and eyes rose once more. He had returned from death to send everyone to it. My power is the power to alter the future itself. I can even rewrite futures in which I have died. Screamed the definitive Yhwach while Ichigo was still trying to confront him. Useless. Yhwach shouted once again, taking away Zangetsu's with his hands and breaking and destroying it, again. This is the end. This world and Soul Society will before my power lose their form and become one. Iwaka's Ryatsu covered almost all the Soul Society and had trapped Ichigo. Everything seemed to be over, but a silver arrow pierced Yhwach from the back to the chest. What is this? Said Yhwach, who became afraid and confused for the first time since a long time ago. Ishida. Ichigo said surprised, noticing that he was his friend and cousin Quincy Ishida who attacked Yhwach with a special arrow of a single use. An arrow that for a few seconds was able to stop the powers of the very same Yhwach, to which the face could be seen again, face that was previously covered by his Ryatsu and the eyes that represented his power, the Almighty. Now the final boss was totally helpless. He did not have his Quincy powers, nor his physical strength nor control over his spiritual energy, nor the Almighty, so he was not able to see the future and alter it. If he died now, it would be irreversible. Ishida was about to alert Ichigo to give him the final blow, but before that, someone that nobody had seen until now, someone with a disturbing appearance and energy appeared in front of Yhwach with his fist raised. "You did not see this coming, right?" Mr. Almighty said that unknown man before lowering his fist towards Yhwach's face. "Who the hell are you?" Yhwach thought with stupefaction and fear. This was a variable that neither he nor the rest of those present could have even imagined. However, Ichigo and friends did not despair excessively, since that strange being did not seem to be an ally of Yhwach and seemed to be about to give him the final blow, surely killing the final enemy of the manga in a faster way than Ichigo could. "But what are you waiting for? Kill him!" Ichigo shouted with all his strength as he advanced at full speed towards Yhwach. The reason why he shouted to Broly in that way was because before he could hit Yhwach unsuspecting and devoid of all his incredible powers. He stopped short of his attack, as if he had reconsidered and decided not to attack, and began to contemplate Yhwach's eyes with a confident smile. "Not doing anything. Damn!" Ichigo shouted in frustration and despair. The interval in which Yhwach could be killed was very short, and due to Broly's surprise intervention he had lost a very brief but valuable time. Ah! Ichigo brandished Zangetsu with all his strength to cut Yhwach in two, trying to avoid Broly's huge, rocky body, but... "What the hell are you doing?" Ichigo screamed with great fury and bewilderment, as Broly's simian tail had lengthened long enough to tie him like an anaconda throttling his prey, restricting his progress and movements. Ah! Ichigo shouted as he tried to cut off Broly's tail with his Zangetsu, but he was unable to make even a small scratch. It seemed impenetrable. And at the end of that little, but at the same time eternal interval of time, Yhwach regained all his powers once again. This is the end, Ishida thought, cursing the whole world for the fact that the opportunity for which so many strive to achieve failed. Ahahaha. I don't know who you are, but thanks for stopping those insects. Now I'll twist and fuse together life and death. With this I'll clear the path to a world with not fear. Yhwach yelled at his impending triumph, terrifying everyone who could hear him. But leaving Broly extremely indifferent, who was a foot away from his face, looking at him as if it were nothing interesting. And that didn't like Yhwach at all, since now he was the most powerful being of all and Broly just a big unknown variable that could disrupt his plans, so he raised his hand towards Broly. "But the first thing I will do is crush you in peak." "No, that is," but Yhwach was unable to finish his sentence, fear and panic had taken over him. "What I see is impossible." Yhwach is the possessor of the skill the Almighty, that can see everything that is to occur from the present moment into the far-flung future, seeing all possible futures at once like countless grains of sand in the wind, and then transform the future in present, taking the most preferable scenario that he have seen in one of those futures. It was an almost invincible power. But it must be frustrating, right? You are so close to me, but it is still impossible for you to see a future in which you can win me or in which you don't lose. Well, I guess the same thing would happen if you give that ability to a small normal ant that has to face the whole sun by himself. It must be frustrating, right? You are so close to me, but it is still impossible for you to see a future in which you can win me or in which you don't lose. Well, I guess the same thing would happen if you give that ability to a small normal ant that has to face the whole sun by himself, Broly said with an arrogance that don't know limits. Yhwach saw all the possible futures as if he were Doctor Strange in Avengers Infinity Wars, but without seeing a single future in which he is even close to putting Broly in trouble. Then with rage, disbelief and with a great existential emptiness he screamed, knowing that this was his end. The end of his existence in this world, and the end of his plan to unite all the worlds into one. An inevitable end, from which he couldn't escape, no matter what he did. And he found that unacceptable. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why do you stand in the fate of the worlds? How can exist a monster like you? It is impossible. It is absurd that something like you can exist. Yhwach shouted when seeing that all possible hope was lost. Therefore, at least he wanted to express his frustration, and also receive an answer about the origin of the abominable being that had sealed his destiny. Who I am doesn't matter, what matters is my plan. And my plan is, well, I don't need to tell you now. I suppose you have already seen or intuit what the future holds for you. Right? Broly said, lowering his arm towards Yhwach in the same way he did before, but this time. I see, Yhwach thought as he watched his immediate future which overlapped with the present. Being devoured as he saw, by a huge sphere of green energy. Palm. The energy sphere hit Yhwach, creating a great glow that blinded Ichigo and the others. And once that glow disappeared, there was no trace of Yhwach's Ryatsu. He had completely disappeared. It's all over. Ichigo said to himself, who was still tied by Broly's tail and couldn't escape. So everything I did was useless. Has that monster defeated him, just like that? Ishida asked himself, rather overwhelmed and depressed. Both he and his father had infiltrated Yhwach's army, worked and struggled to create a unique opportunity in which they could stab him in the back, momentarily making him lost his powers to kill him. But none of that was necessary. That mysterious three-eyed muscular man had finished him at the height of his power without any stratagem. Only with pure power lead him to madness, despair and destruction. Ha! You call me monster. It is not like you are very normal. You can see all the futures, modify them, grant your power and part of your soul with only physical contact and recover it later, taking with that the abilities of that person with whom you divided your soul. Okay, I'm immortal, I can destroy galaxies easily, manipulate transcendental laws and carry my own universe with me and impose its laws in other universes. But it has been offensive, said Broly, feeling partly offended and flattered to be called monster by a being he was interested in absorbing, since he considered them quite unusual, therefore wanting their skills or knowledge. Those words didn't go unnoticed by those present in that exciting and unpredictable final fight, and especially Ichigo lost the motivation to fight for the moment. He didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but he was sure of something after being subjugated by him with his tail and witnessing how he defeated Yhwach. He was above his knowledge and abilities. And if he was an enemy, they couldn't beat him. Crack. Crack. Although your appearance is unusual, you aren't an Arrancar. I have investigated too many to distinguish them at first sight. Nor are you a Quincy, I don't notice a single fragment of the soul or power of Yhwach in you. And of course you're not a Shinigami, that's very clear. Are you perhaps a fullbring that nobody know? No, you're something different, something even weirder than Ichigo, something that had never appeared before. Fascinating, Aizen said, coming out of the rocks more fascinated than scared by that abominable being from whom he had no information or proof of his existence, not even from the theoretical point of view. That's the Aizen that I know, he doesn't disappointed me. Broly approached to the wounded, but in his process of regeneration Aizen, and as if he were a small child who had found a lost toy. Oh Aizen. With you I wanted to talk too. How lucky you were here too. What a surprise. Broly said, pretending to be surprised by throwing Ichigo, still tied by Strauss, to Rinji, who was injured on the ground. Ah! They shouted in unison, seeing that they were about to collide. And obviously they hit each other with the heads, creating the little absurd comic gag of Bleach. And Aizen, ignoring the absurdity of that comic gag happening in a quite tense situation, continued the conversation. Yes, a great coincidence. I also want to talk to you. But exactly what do you want from me? Said Aizen, showing his great dignity as an intelligent, powerful, and refined villain. Even before a person capable of defeating with great ease, someone whom his greatest enemy was unable to kill, remained firm and defiant, and since he was practically immortal thanks to the Hogyoku, he didn't fear too much for his life. Yes. I like your attitude. Perfect. You see, one day I came up with an idea. The idea was to find and gather a group of extraordinary people who were dead, destined to die and / or who were evil or that have a questionable morality, and see if I could turn them into something else. And you Aizen, just like Yhwach, are one of the lucky ones that has passed my ambitious casting. Congratulations. Said Broly, applauding his idea and later execution, while Ichigo and Rinji, who had stopped beating each other absurdly, gave off cold sweat when they heard Broly's plan. Collect powerful evildoers. More people like Aizen and Yhwach. Where does he will find monsters like those too? And more important, what does he want to do with them? I'm afraid I'll have to refuse your offer, Aizen replied, gripping his Kyoka Suigetsu, preparing for an impending battle, despite the odds of winning. Broly pulled a smile upon seeing Aizen's reaction. Oh. You say it as if you had a choice. Broly teleported behind Aizen and increased the gravity around him to a point that was bearable but would nullify the movements of every living being, even evolved Shinigamis. And grabbing Aizen from the chest, helping him to stand up, he said arrogantly, good attitude. Maybe he'll kill me, but at least I'll smack his handsome face, right? It's not bad, I'll let you do that, and it wouldn't be fair to do it without taking off these annoying clothes. I'm not a bully. Using Hakai, Broly disintegrated all the seals that had been placed on Aizen to suppress his powers and the abilities of the Hogyoku, that made him evolve at great speed, making him more and more powerful every second. Shit. Said Ichigo, who was quite hurt by all his confrontations with Yhwach and Broly, and now the other greatest enemy that all the worlds had faced, was totally free again. Aizen, the one who defeated the entire Soul Society and the Wizards almost alone and with whom Ichigo had to renounce his Shinigami powers to give him a decisive blow to defeat him. However, that still wasn't enough to defeat him. In fact, Aizen would have won if not for the brilliant strategy of Urahara, the creator of the Hogyoku, who used a powerful Kido in the Hogyoku attached to Aizen so that when he was seriously wounded it would activate to seal him. And now that powerful being reappeared without any restriction again. Do you need time to get used to it? You have been restricted for years. Right? Broly said, lowering the level of gravity so that Aizen could stand on his own. Thanks for the consideration, but it will not be necessary, said Aizen, who like Ichigo when he made his last Mujetsu began to merge with Kyoka Suigetsu, completing thus the process of evolution that was interrupted by Urahara when he was sealed with the Hogyoku. Oh. Not bad. You are making yourself a little stronger, said Broly as if he were an adult praising a small child for having achieved a small trifle. However, Aizen didn't mind that disparagement, although it hurt. He understood that his opponent was at a higher level and that for some reason Broly seemed to know him and the reach of his powers and strength, even though Aizen didn't even know his name. On the other hand, the Hogyoku embedded in his chest, according to Aizen's wishes, was gradually making him evolve due to the influence and pressure that Broly was exerting on him. His body was getting used to the increased gravity created by the spatial invasion of Broly, which was increasing little by little so that Aizen could adapt to that gravity and gradually become more powerful. And Aizen understood that but didn't care. He knew he needed all the help possible to overcome this obstacle, and that Broly's arrogance could be his biggest advantage. I still cannot feel his power, since he's at a higher level, but little by little I will go closer to him, if he doesn't finish me before. Well, if you don't start, I will do it. With those provocative words Broly's tail lengthened and tuned, giving the impression that it was some sort of hairy whip sword, that rushed towards Aizen sideways. Clan. Pum. Aizen, who had merged with his Zanpakuto, materialized an illusory sword in his right hand and blocked Strauss with precision. However, the power of the impact further destroyed the ground around Aizen, numbed his arm. He struggled to endure that casual side blow. Did I overdrive? Broly asked, lacerating his tail against Aizen again and again, gradually increasing the speed so Aizen could get used to it. Clan. 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 Palm. Crack. Palm. Crack. Clan. Clan. Clannen. Clan. 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 Palm. Crack. Palm. Crack. The rain of sharp blows continued, and with each exchange of blows the ground and the structures nearby and not so close collapsed, causing that Ichigo that loaded with Rinji they moved away of the zone to recover energies after the bloody battle. With the passage of time, Aizen adapted more and more to the attacks of Broly, until finally he was able to maintain a conversation at the same time that was able to follow the battle. Why are you interested in making me stronger? Are you an eccentric like Kenpachi who only seeks to satisfy his thirst for combat with someone who can rival him? Asked Aizen, trying to get some information about Broly, and this was a good question to know his motivations and personality. Well, that could be fun, even interesting, but I doubt that anyone of this dimension will be able to reach a level even close to me, even I when I was 10 years old. I just want to see how far you can go, said Broly without taking Aizen's question too seriously. He was just entertaining himself, hoping to see a result already expected in advance. Aizen wasn't happy with that response at all. He was an immortal being who had achieved the absolute mastery of all Shinigami disciplines, had the most powerful Ryatsu in history. His intelligence could only be surpassed by Urahara, and he had reached a state that had far exceeded all barriers between Shinigami and Hollow. At this point the Hogyoku would have given him the ability to defeat Yhwach without resorting to many stratagems. He would only need the help of Kyoka Suigetsu to make him fall into a perfect illusion. And despite all his abilities, which included the help of the Hogyoku and his capacity for evolution, Broly was belittling him, telling him that he could never reach his level, not even approach. However, something could be deduced from his arrogant words. This dimension? Does he come from hell by chance? I see. Let me give you a sample of my abilities, said Aizen rather annoyed, pointing his unoccupied hand towards Broly. Bakudo 61 Rikujikoro, 999 version, Bakudo 61 Rikujikoro, 999 version. When naming this spell, 6 rectangular beams of light rushed towards Broly's waist, surrounding him and immobilizing him, and then 999 more did the same with all the other parts of the body, giving the impression of that he has been trapped inside a giant ball of light. Heido 99 Goryu Tenmitsu. Almost instantaneously Aizen formulated his higher level Heido, where 5 Kido's Dargon rose from the ground and rushed towards the immobilized Broly to devour him. Heido 90 Kurohitsuji. Instantly before the dragons could reach Broly, Aizen summoned one of his most characteristic Heido, enclosing Broly with his Goryu Tenmitsu in a vortex of gravity capable of altering spacetime. Something very similar to a cubic black hole. But... Boom! Broly got rid of those 3 Kido easily, like they were strings of wet tissue paper. You really expected to beat me with that when it didn't work either with Ichigo or with Yhwach? Broly asked, not making sense of Aizen's actions, and feeling somewhat underrated. Although impressed as when Ichigo destroyed his Kurohitsuji with his bare hands, Aizen's composure faltered. He expected that Broly could break these spells, but not so easily, but it wasn't the first time that happened to him and therefore he didn't get so much surprise. Of course not, but... Could you take a look at my soul? My Kyokasu Jetsu, Aizen said, materializing an illusory sword more solid and mysterious than the previous one in his hand, turning it upside down and showing the end. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.